Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. I'm recording this on Tuesday, October 24th, the day the NBA season kicks off. The Grizzlies don't play until Wednesday, but the NBA season starts today. We as Grizzlies fans are licking our wounds a little bit as we got the news on Sunday that Steven Adams would miss the entire season. So this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I already gave my immediate reactions and thoughts. I'll kind of add a little bit more to that as I've had a couple of days to think about it, and I've had the ability to read what other smart people have said about the situation. I'm also going to talk on this episode about Marcus Smart's debut in the Grizzlies' final preseason game. I'm going to look ahead to what I think is the Grizzlies' opening night rotation, also preview the coming week of Grizzlies basketball, and also talk about the roster cut down. So a lot to get to, and we will go ahead and do it right after this word where I tell you that Underdog Fantasy is running a new user sign-up bonus for the NBA season. If you hear this on Tuesday, they're giving all users, actually, not just new users, basically a free pick with LeBron James. If he scores at least 1 point, well, that's a winner. Also, if you sign up using the promo code FBBF or click the link in this episode's description, they will match your opening deposit up to $500. They'll go ahead and double that opening deposit. One cool thing about Underdog Fantasy is you can play in private drafts. So I will be doing daily NBA fantasy drafts with my listeners, with my Patreon supporters in private drafts. It's a really fun way to play fantasy basketball for money. So if that sounds appealing to you, go ahead, use that promo code FBBF or click the link in this episode's description. All right, let's start with the Grizzlies' final preseason game, and then I'll talk more about the Steven Adams situation, the Grizzlies situation, as far as maybe some moves they might consider or the moves they are definitely not going to make. But the Grizzlies played their final preseason game last Friday. They lost a close one to the Bucks. They ended up in the preseason 0-3 on the road with 3 close games that came down to the wire. They lost them all. They won both of their home games. There's a joke in there about how that's basically Grizzlies regular season basketball, at least based on the second half of last year. The Grizzlies were unbelievable at home last season, and they struggled on the road, and they also struggled giving up double-digit leads basically from January on. Did that coincide with losing Steven Adams? Slightly. Just a little bit. But the Grizzlies winning and losing in preseason, who really cares? But we saw, most importantly, Marcus Smart's debut. He got the start, and I think he showed a lot of the exciting stuff we were looking forward to. He scored 11 points. He had 6 assists. He made an early three-pointer. He got a pick 6 where he got a steal for a breakaway layup. All of that was, I think, exactly what we were hoping for. I saw somebody point out that the 6 assists that Marcus Smart had, that ties Dylan Brooks's season high from last year for assists. All right, I don't know if there's any reason really to compare assist numbers between Marcus and Dylan, as they're totally different players, and Marcus Smart is a point guard a lot of the time, but it's still a fun little comparison. Not meaningful, but enjoyable. Marcus Smart should fit in nicely with this Grizzlies team, and obviously is going to step up and play a really big role while Ja Morant is out. Also a guy who's going to be huge while Ja Morant is out, Desmond Bane, once again, was completely locked in. Desmond Bane had yet another big game. He finished the preseason as the NBA's leading scorer. He averaged 22 points per game in 25 minutes per game, made 48% of his threes for the preseason. So Desmond Bane looks poised for maybe yet another breakout for possibly an all-star campaign. Bane looks super good. Jaren Jackson Jr. in the final preseason game, I think you can say it was his worst one. He did pick up a few assists where he passed out of double teams so teammates could hit three-pointers. He got a steal and a block, but he was in foul trouble. He actually fouled out in 19 minutes. Some of the fouls were of the bad variety. The last foul was terrible. I mean, the last foul was basically showing what's wrong with the NBA's shooting foul rules as he stood stationary with his arms straight up, and then Damian Lillard jumps into him. The Bucks announcers were like, oh, good job by Lillard launching himself into a stationary Jaren to draw the foul. That was frustrating. But some of the other fouls he picked up, offensive fouls, kind of go under the, what are you doing? This is a problem that we have to fix. Also, Giannis bully-balled Jaren a few times. Yeah, Jaren got him once on a help block, but other times just Giannis went straight at him. I mean, basically no one can stop Giannis one-on-one, so maybe we don't have to hold Jaren to that elite standard. But this was probably the least exciting performance of Jaren this preseason. Another guy who started was Zaire Williams. So Zaire Williams, that was the biggest topic for the Grizzlies until the Steven Adams injury news, as in who's going to be the starter on opening night. On the wing, it looks like it probably is going to be Zaire because he got to start and once again played really well. He had a couple of nice dunks. He scored 15 points on only 6 field goal attempts. That's because he got to the line 8 times. So he was 4 out of 6 on 2-pointers. He had 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and an assist. His assist, he once again found Xavier Tillman for a bucket. In the preseason, Zaire averaged 12.5 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.6 assists. In the 5 preseason games, he got 3 blocks and 4 steals. I think you saw everything you needed to see from Zaire, where the Grizzlies can and I think will start him with confidence at that small forward spot. Also, I think because of losing Steven Adams, it probably makes more sense if there's any kind of tiebreaker needed between him and Kennard. It's we need the size. I don't know if it makes sense to start Luke Kennard at the 3 alongside Bane and Marcus Smart if you're also missing Steven Adams. Just the size, the height of Zaire probably going to be needed. So I do anticipate that Zaire Williams will start on Wednesday against the Pelicans. Who knows? I could definitely always be wrong. Maybe it will be Luke Kennard. Maybe it will be David Roddy. Maybe there'll be some curveball that we don't even see coming. Luke Kennard did finally make a couple of threes in this one. He came into it 2 out of 12 on 3-pointers in the preseason, but he made 2 in a row in a fun little sequence where he actually blew by Jay Crowder for a layup, and then maybe that kind of helped him out. Seeing the ball go in the basket gave him some confidence, and he knocked down 2 straight threes after that. He did only finish 2 out of 6 on threes, so not the best preseason from Luke Kennard. Santi Aldama once again looked very, very sharp. He made 3 out of 4 3-pointers, had 13 points in just 15 minutes. And Xavier Tillman, who's going to be asked to do a lot this year now, with the loss of Steven Adams. We're going to see Xavier Tillman, I think, start most of the season. Xavier Tillman's going to play anywhere from 28 to 34 minutes a night in that starting role. Xavier was solid against the Bucks, kind of put together, I would say, a typical line for him. 8 points, 7 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block. That's the kind of thing he's going to do all year. Last year, in the games he started, he basically averaged about 10 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists and a steal, so I think we'll see that from Xavier. He did miss all 3 of his 3-point attempts in this last preseason game, but I just wanted him to shoot. That was my goal for him in the preseason, and he did. He took 9 3-pointers in the preseason. He only made 1, which of course is not good, but I think just attempting those 3-pointers is something important, and he did that. As far as other guys on the roster, I think worth mentioning, LaRavia had a wild game. He made two of the stranger mid-range shots you'll ever see. He had a very nice drive to the basket that he scored on, but he also airballed 3 3-pointers. He missed all 6 of his 3-point attempts. He took 12 field goal attempts. In the first matchup this preseason against the Bucks, he took 14. So you want to know who led the Grizzlies in field goal attempts per minute in the preseason? Yeah, Jake LaRavia. Now, he always says that the coaches are telling him to be super aggressive. I keep saying, I'm not sure he should be so aggressive. Maybe let the offense come to him and just take open threes. So I don't know. Maybe the coaching staff is saying, yes, you are doing the right thing. Keep firing. My analysis is, hey, buddy, maybe slow down a little bit there. Notably, John Conchar was not dressed for this game, so there's still some mystery around him. As far as I'm concerned, is he healthy? Is he okay? The Grizzlies said he missed some games for personal reasons. What will we see out of Conchar? Could he be the mystery guy on opening night in the rotation if they go 10 deep? So the Grizzlies for opening night, of course, they finalized their opening night roster. There were no surprises at all there. They waived Shaq Harrison. I mean, absolutely no mystery. The frustrating thing about opening night roster is, of course, 3 of our, best 7 or 8 guys are unavailable. Steven Adams out for the year, Brandon Clark likely out for the year, and, of course, Ja Morant is suspended. The Grizzlies waiving Shaq Harrison with this Steven Adams injury, you would have to think the odds of Shaq Harrison returning as the extra roster player once Ja Morant goes on the suspended list, that seems super unlikely. It seems like they're going to go with a big man in that spot if they don't make some kind of trade or something. Also, before opening night, the Grizzlies had their deadline to pick up some team options. And again, this is all like perfunctory news items we knew that were going to happen. Like the Grizzlies exercised their 4th-year options on Zaire Williams and Santi Aldama. They exercised their 3rd-year options on David Roddy and Jake LaRavia. Now, moving on to the Steven Adams news and like what we had to process as Grizzlies fans, and the more we think about it, I think one thing I said on the episode I released on Sunday, I definitely stick by, which is there's no rush, and I don't think the Grizzlies are going to be in a rush. I don't think they're going to make a big move where they send out like multiple picks to bring in maybe like a long-term starter. I mean, specifically I said you're definitely not sending out assets you really value. Like they might send out a 2nd-round pick or something if they can find a trade that makes sense, but you're not sending out lots of stuff for a stopgap. You're also maybe not even sending out lots of stuff for a guy that you could think might be a long-term partner with Jaren just because of all the uncertainty about this season. I mean, frankly, with not knowing exactly what you're getting from Ja Morant, you're probably not going to make a big move. That's why I think they will be patient and probably wait until the trade deadline, or wait at the very least until Ja Morant gets cleared to play and you assess what the league is like. At that point, you see how your season is going. And then at that point, sure, you could like make a move. The players that I do think maybe they would look at, there's a couple of more names that I did not mention that I think might make a lot of sense. Like I highlighted Isaiah Hartenstein, Kelly Olynyk, and Daniel Tice as like pretty decent NBA players that would make sense on the Grizzlies. And all of those guys, though, are making a little bit more money. And the problem acquiring any of them is coming up with matching salary. Like Isaiah Hartenstein is a perfect fit. Unfortunately, he makes $9 million a year. He makes more than that Dillon Brooks traded player exception. Like, if he made less, you could see something like working it out where you either release Lofton or you trade Lofton, and then you bring in Hartenstein into like the roster spot you opened up and use that traded player exception. By the way, Kenneth Lofton Jr., this is his chance, like I said, but the odds of Kenneth Lofton Jr., I think, being on this team now later in the season have rapidly declined. Like, Kenneth Lofton Jr., yes, he's a big, but he's not a rim protector. He's not a defensive big. He's a microwave scoring big. And he's a developmental project. And developmental projects for playoff teams are luxuries. And at this point, you can't really afford to have that luxury anymore. With no Steven Adams, with no Brandon Clark, you can't have a developmental big, I don't think. At this point, you got to have guys who can help you in the games right now. I mean, maybe they give Lofton a shot in the rotation. I kind of hope they will. In just a second, I'm going to preview what I think the rotation is for opening night. I think there's a chance that Kenneth Lofton Jr. is in it. But if he's not, and they don't give him that chance early on, it would make sense probably that he's the guy that ends up getting either traded or cut to open up a roster spot to bring in another big. Like Hartenstein, I keep highlighting because he's a defensive big. He's I think a very strong player who is on a team that has multiple center options. Like the Knicks have Mitchell Robinson. They also seem to like Jericho Sims, who's a little bit younger. Maybe you could get him for not very much. He's on an expiring deal. Kelly Olynyk on an expiring deal with the Jazz. Now that falls under the, if you are done with Steven Adams and Steven Adams is the matching salary, all right, would the Jazz trade Adams and something, like Adams in a first, or I want to say first, but like Adams and maybe like 2 seconds. So Adams, is signed for next season as well. So then you get to the problem with a trade where maybe the team you're sending him to is like, listen, you got to pay us something to take this salary. And then it becomes like, well, it's not worth it to us to send out all that stuff just to get like a Kelly Olynyk. Like if they would take Steven Adams for Kelly Olynyk straight up, all right, maybe think about it. Same situation with Daniel Tice on the Pacers. He makes too much money where you have to include extra guys. Like you could. So like if you really desperately wanted Hartenstein, you could trade John Conchar and Jake LaRavia. Those two guys together, the salary works. Conchar and Lofton, salary does not work. So if you out there want to totally give up on Jake LaRavia, you could package him and Conchar for Hartenstein. Personally, there's a few problems there, the way I see it. One, you probably shouldn't give up on Jake LaRavia for sort of a stopgap center. Like, he's a young guy. Things are already going poorly. I don't think you want to keep digging the hole and making it worse for your long-term outlook. We're in it for the long term. We have the next 3 years, we have Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. under contract. So probably not just dumping Jake LaRavia. Probably not, again, trading away first-round picks to bring in someone who's not like a real needle mover for your team. Also, if you did something like that, if you traded away like LaRavia and Roddy or LaRavia and Conchar just to package those salaries so then you could take back someone making a little bit more, all of a sudden you go from maybe needing a consolidation trade on the wing to being a little bit thin on the wing. Like if you lost Conchar and LaRavia, all right, now we just have Zaire and Roddy and also maybe Vince Williams Jr. as your only small forwards on the roster. So that makes it seem like, to me, it's unlikely that you're going to get somebody making that much money, because I don't think there's players the Grizzlies want to give up on. I don't think they really want to give up on Steven Adams. I don't know if they want to give up on Brandon Clark, which is the other like larger amount of matching salary you could use. By the way, it's just so frustrating as Grizzlies fans, like in a salary cap league where you now have basically all this dead money. Ja Morant, you're paying a big chunk of your salary cap to him, out for 25 games, and then because of the injuries, you're paying $25 million to Clark and Adams, guys who are not going to help you this season. Now, if you look at guys making a little bit less, there are a couple of other names. None of these names are ones that I mentioned last episode that I think they're worth exploring. The main one, and I think this makes a ton of sense, the main one is Mike Muscala. Mike Muscala, sort of a stretch defender. He can shoot three-pointers. He was a pretty solid rotation player. He's on the Wizards now. What do the Wizards need with a Mike Muscala? Absolutely nothing. You could trade John Conchar for Mike Muscala straight up. You could trade Kenneth Lofton Jr. for Mike Muscala straight up. If you decide as an organization, we can't afford the luxury of giving Junior time to develop, if you know you're going to get rid of him, well, yeah, I honestly would probably offer Kenneth Lofton Jr. for Mike Muscala right now. Like, that's something that makes sense to me. I think Mike Muscala is a good fit with Jaren Jackson Jr. Adding him as like your fourth big in a rotation with Jaren Jackson Jr., Xavier Tillman, and Santi Aldama, that makes a ton of sense to me. Makes a ton of sense. I would highlight that one as like, if they trade for anybody, it's probably going to be Mike Muscala. Another guy you might trade for that I think you could possibly get for free, or basically free, is Jalen Smith from the Pacers. Now, I highlighted Daniel Tice on the Pacers. The Pacers have a lot of bigs. They have Miles Turner, of course. They have Obi Toppin. He's a power forward. They drafted another power forward in Jarris Walker. They have Isaiah Jackson, who's a shot blocking backup, is a little bit younger. I assume he'd be in the rotation over Daniel Tice, and also over Jalen Smith. Now, Jalen Smith, not a traditional center or not a traditional five. He's more of a scorer. He's not, in my mind, I mean, I don't want to pretend I'm an expert on Jalen Smith. In my mind, he's not that elite of a rebounder, and he's not a good rim protector, but he's a body. He's a guy. He's an okay NBA guy with size. And at this point, that's where we're at. And if I'm correct about this, I think you could trade away John Conchar and take back $5.05 million. That's the matching salary for John Conchar. If you're giving up on John Conchar, if you're like, hey, listen, he makes more than Lofton, we're not going to get rid of LaRavia. He makes more than Lofton, so the matching salary you get from trading Conchar is more. You can take back Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith makes $5.04 million this year, so $5,040,000, and that just fits, as far as I can tell, under the matching salary for what you can take back for trading John Conchar. John Conchar going to Indiana, maybe they don't care that he has salary going into the next 3 seasons. Maybe they like a little homecoming story from the Purdue Fort Wayne legend, John Conchar. I could see a straight up John Conchar for Jalen Smith trade happening. Now, some other names out there that I don't think are that likely that, like, I guess you would consider is like, you know, I saw people mention Mason Plumlee. I don't think the Clippers want to give up Mason Plumlee. I think the Clippers like having Mason Plumlee and Zubac as their center rotation. Maybe they would. I mean, maybe the Clipper season goes poorly and you can get Mason Plumlee later in the year. Like, that's a $5 million deal. That's something where you could even, if you waived Kenneth Lofton Jr., you can take that back in the Dylan Brooks trade exception. I mean, that's another reason. You don't have to trade John Conchar. If you're comfortable with trading Kenneth Lofton Jr. and adding him to the pile of dead money, along, like, not just Steven Adams and Brandon Clark, along with Josh Christopher and Isaiah Todd and Kennedy Chandler. Like, if you don't mind waiving Kenneth Lofton Jr., well, then you could bring in Mike Muscala in that Dylan Brooks traded player exception. You could bring in Jalen Smith in that Dylan Brooks traded player exception. You could bring in Mason Plumlee. You could bring in another guy I'm interested in, which is Precious Achiuwa from the Raptors. Maybe Darko Rajakovic would be fine with working out something to give the Grizzlies, you know, Precious Achiuwa. I don't know what that would take. That might be multiple second-round picks. Who knows? Would they give up on Christian Koloko? I mean, now I'm getting desperate. Now I'm basically going to say, how about Bruno Fernando from the Hawks? Like, those are way deeper cut guys. They're honestly more of projects. I don't think Precious is a project. He's more of a known kind of 4-ish type player, but he's shown some shot blocking. He has kind of flashed a 3-pointer. So, like, that's one where I'm like, man, we need anybody. I could see him doing that, but I don't think it's super likely. Ones I think could be very likely, Mike Muscala or Jalen Smith. Honestly, if they don't go the patient route, which I think is what they are going to do, I don't think they're going to do anything immediately. But if something happens immediately, for me, I think Mike Muscala is definitely the name I would look at. As far as names I'm not going to look at, a couple of you commented on YouTube. I thought about saying James Wiseman last episode. I don't see it. I mean, James Wiseman makes a lot of money. Same story for Marvin Bagley. Yeah, you could probably get Marvin Bagley or James Wiseman from the Pistons, but you would have to include basically either Steven Adams or Brandon Clark to match that salary. I don't think either one of those guys is that good. I mean, I'd be lying if I say it's not a little tantalizing to, like, have Bagley and Jaren, you know, those guys from the top 4 of their draft class maybe pairing up. But, like, I don't think that makes the Grizzlies, a 50-win team or anything. So I don't think that's very, very likely. I also purposely didn't mention the whole thing about, the Grizzlies actually drafted Walker Kessler. If we had only drafted Walker Kessler and kept him and not traded that pick as part of the LaRavia deal. Guys, the Grizzlies had Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Brandon Clark going into that draft. Absolutely no one was saying they needed to get a center at the end of the first round. So there's no reason the Grizzlies should have had the foresight or should have thought about drafting and keeping Walker Kessler. All right, so those, I think, are my updated thoughts on what the Grizzlies might do because of the Steven Adams injury. How will the rotation look on opening night because of the Steven Adams injury? Let's get to that right after this short break. All right, I think most of us, when we look at the Grizzlies rotation now, I think we all assume Zaire Williams is going to start on Wednesday, and thus your starters are going to be Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Zaire Williams, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Xavier Tillman. We know Luke Kennard and Santi Aldama are going to play off the bench. I would go ahead and say we know Derrick Rose is going to play off of the bench. I think the interesting questions to me, and this is like the true nitty-gritty, that's why you're here listening to the final quarter of a Grits and Grinds episode. The nitty-gritty for me is a couple of things. It's who are the 9th and 10th guys? Is there a 10th guy? And then how do they kind of stagger Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr.? Now, let's start with the stagger question. Last year, we had a lot of evidence for what the Grizzlies would do when there's no Steven Adams or Brandon Clark. Xavier Tillman and Jaren and Santi would frequently play all of the power forward and center minutes. They would play 9-man rotations rather frequently. I think that's probably what we're going to see a lot of the time this year, unless they trade for another big. I think Tillman's going to play around 30 minutes. Jaren, they're going to try to play him 30 to 34 minutes. Hopefully he doesn't get in foul trouble. Santi Aldama probably going to play anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes. The question, though, is how they stagger it, though. In the preseason, a lot of the time, they would have Jaren in for like the first 6 minutes and then take him out, and then he would come back in into the first quarter and kind of overlap the end of the first and the start of the second to kind of anchor some second units, and then he would go back out, and then he would come back in for the end of the first half. Thus, his playing time was split up into 3 sections. Now, last year, that's what they did with Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane would do that, where Desmond Bane would anchor some of those second units. I think that might make more sense. And so because of that, my guess for opening night is going to be that like Kennard and Aldama come in simultaneously, like 5 to 6 to 7 minutes into the first quarter, and Bane and Tillman come out. And then you briefly run with Marcus Smart, Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane. You have those 3 guards all together. And then you have Santi and Jaren. I love that 5-man lineup. Then I would think at the start of the second quarter or like at the end of the first quarter, you bring Desmond Bane back in. Like once Jaren goes to the bench, I want Desmond Bane to come back in. Things I do not want, I don't want Desmond and Jaren both on the bench at the same time. Also, if Marcus Smart plays kind of a traditional veteran guard minutes load where he plays like 8 or 9 minutes to start the half and then plays 6 to 8 minutes to end the half. If we have Derrick Rose filling in at the point guard playing like the middle 8 minutes of the first half, I don't want Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. all off the court at the same time. So that's why I think I would rather stagger Desmond Bane back in to anchor the second unit lineups. That's what they did last year. I would be all for them doing that again. But in this preseason, they've been doing that with Jaren Jackson Jr. Maybe it doesn't matter. Either way, that's what they're going to try. Now, for the 9th and 10th men, I think it's going to be David Roddy. I think David Roddy is just your backup small forward. I imagine him or Zaire are going to play maybe a few minutes at power forward. If they go with a 9-man rotation, if Aldama doesn't play like a full 30 minutes, there's going to be minutes available at power forward. Thus, I wouldn't be surprised if in like the second quarter, we see some lineups where Xavier's the only big or Jaren is the only big. I'm going to expect that. Now, this is the opportunity probably in second quarters where if there is a 10th man, I would guess it's going to be Jake LaRavia. I think they want to see what they have in LaRavia, and maybe LaRavia ends up playing like 5 to 10 minutes in the game as a 10th man. If not, this is where Kenneth Lofton Jr. might get his opportunity. And again, when you look at your roster and you say, all right, we're going to eventually need a big, maybe you go ahead and play Lofton and say, listen, this is it. Let's see if it works. Let's have some fun. Let's maybe start the second quarter with Jaren and Lofton out there together and let them cook. And maybe that could be a solution to some of the Grizzlies' problems. But I think, or one thing I'm looking forward to seeing is how they end the halves and how they end the game. I'm going to guess they end the half with the Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, and Marcus Smart threesome all playing together. And then whether or not they play Jaren and Xavier or Jaren and Santi, I'm going to guess is going to be a game-by-game decision. Now, that's my best idea on what a 9-man rotation is going to look like, or a 10-man rotation. I'm showing this to you if you're on YouTube right now. If you're listening to audio only, I hope you're just imagining all of these things as I explain them. Now, I do think based on matchup, that will determine probably like the minutes that Santi and Xavier play. Playing the Pelicans on opening night, they have a big front court. They have Zion Williamson. They have Jonas Valanciunas. Like Brandon Ingram starts at the 3. I would assume Xavier Tillman is going to play a lot. Xavier Tillman is going to be, I think, tasked with guarding Zion Williamson. Like Xavier Tillman, frankly, is the best option. So that's probably a big Xavier Tillman night. On Friday, they host the reigning champs, the Denver Nuggets. By the way, if you're in the Nashville area, hey, come to Noble's Beer Hall. I will be there watching the Grizzlies and Nuggets game. I will be giving away Grizzlies prizes. That's right. We're having one of our Nashville watch parties. It's at Noble's Beer Hall this Friday night. Come watch the game with me and other Grizzlies fans. Also, by the way, it's at 6 p.m. So make plans if you're in the Middle Tennessee area to come to Noble's Beer Hall for a Grizzlies Nashville watch party. Now, you're playing the Nuggets. You're playing Nikola Jokic. Tillman's going to have to play a lot that night. Now, the Grizzlies opening week, it's kind of tough. Like opening night against the Pelicans, that's a toss-up game. Like Zion's healthy right now. Having to play Zion Williamson and Jonas Valanciunas and Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum, certified Grizz killer, without Steven Adams, that's a tough ask. So that's a toss-up game to me. The game against the Nuggets you're going to be an underdog. Now, reminder, the Grizzlies were undefeated last season at home on Friday and Saturday nights. The Grizzlies had the best home record in the NBA last year. So hopefully they can take care of business in these games, at the very least get a split. And then you think, all right, playing at the Wizards, that's a win. But it's an obvious trap game. Second out of a back-to-back on the road. And yes, we all think the Wizards are going to be bad this year. But like playing bad teams early in the season, that is tricky. So that's a tough, like your most winnable game is the second out of a back-to-back on the road. Not ideal. Then on Monday, you play the Dallas Mavericks. That also is a home game. So 3 out of 4 at home, that's good. But I would say Pelicans, Nuggets, Mavericks, 3 out of your first 4, and the most winnable one being second night of a back-to-back on the road. That's kind of tough. And of course, we're reeling a little bit with the Steven Adams news. And so if you stumble out of the gate, then I think the pressure builds. And then after those first 4 games, you go on the road to the Jazz, and then you got to play the Trailblazers on the road back-to-back. Now, again, you think these are winnable games. They are winnable games on paper, but also the Grizzlies struggle on the road. And how much will this kind of cumulatively build where like, hey, this season feels like it's going off the rails? Like, is that a thing that happens? I don't know, but I do think it's not like totally doom and gloom to worry about that. But I'm not going to let the worries get me down because I am super excited for this season to start. Of course, to see what Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Marcus Smart and Xavier Tillman and Luke Kennard, what they can all do together. Can one of the young guys pop? Will Zion Williams keep up his incredible preseason into the regular season? I hope so. I think so. As far as a season-long prediction, before the Steven Adams injury, I was relatively optimistic. I thought they would win 47 or 48 games. I thought they would clear the play-in no problem. I thought they'd be like anywhere from a 3 to a 6 seed. Now, unfortunately, I think it's going to be quite the battle this year. By the way, notably, the Grizzlies win total line in Vegas didn't really move based on the Steven Adams injury news. If you want to read into that, the books already knew. Like the odds have changed a little bit. Like the VIG has gone up if you want to take the Grizzlies under. But I'm still seeing Grizzlies over under 45.5 wins. Before the Adams news, I was optimistically, confidently over. Now I think I'm a slide under. My prediction is the Grizzlies win 45 games this year. I just think they are now neck and neck with like the Pelicans and the Timberwolves and the Mavericks and the Clippers and the Kings, where previously I thought they were better than those teams. I already didn't think they were as good as the Nuggets or the Lakers or the Suns or the Warriors. Now I fear they're just in this big clump of other similarly as talented teams, and it's going to come down to injuries. It's going to come down to suspensions. And guess what? The Grizzlies are already losing those things. We're already down Ja Morant 25 games. Marcus Smart, how many games is he even going to play? And now no Steven Adams, no Brandon Clark. Because of that, I'm probably thinking 45 and 37 is going to be my prediction for this year. This is the first time I've taken an under for the Grizzlies in a while. It just does feel like we got a lot going on. I hope I'm wrong, of course. I hope we scream our way to 50 wins once again. But anyways, that is the full episode for today. I'll be back recapping opening night on Thursday. If you don't watch these on YouTube, if you're not subscribed to YouTube, please go and subscribe to the Grits and Grinds YouTube channel. If you want to support the creation of these shows, go to patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. I'll be playing Underdog Fantasy with my Patreon supporters. You can sign up for Underdog Fantasy, and they will match your opening deposit up to $500. Use that promo code FBBF. But more importantly, go support the creation of my work at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. You get bonus content if you join over there. You can join the Slack channel. You can ask me Grizzlies questions around the clock over there. A big thank you to people who have signed up over there in the past couple of weeks. I really appreciate that. All right. Hope you guys have a great Tuesday. I will talk to you soon. I'm excited for opening night. Go Grizz.